It's really a pleasure to be here. We know that we are in a special, unprecedented time in our history. It's a once in a lifetime pandemic that we're all going through. And it's really good to take a look at our mental health, to take a look at our well being, and to find out what the Lord also has to tell us as far as our health is concerned. So let me just share screen. So with this, as I have said, it's going to be about our wellness. We will not just be discussing how to care for our members, but definitely that will be part of the coverage. So I was contemplating on what the Lord wanted me to tell all of you at the beginning, just to set the tone also. And I found particularly this verse from the third letter of John. And this is actually a letter that was sent from an elder. So the author is supposed to be an elder to Gaius. And it really is just mainly wishing well. And it reads, "Dear friend or beloved, I pray that you may enjoy good health and that all may go well with you, even as your soul is getting along well." Because in those days, the early Christians used to greet each other, and this is actually mainly greeting each other well. But then part of their belief at the time is that the Lord wills for us to be well, and financial blessings, physical well-being, as they put it, is something that is the Lord's will. So I think this is one thought that we could actually ponder on. What is the Lord's will for us as far as our health goes? What is the Lord's will for us as far as our journey in this earthly life goes? So oftentimes we hear the word health, but there seems to be a skew as far as the attention that people give. No, oftentimes when we talk about health, we would have that slant and would refer to physical health. No, physical health. No, so are you sick? Do you have hypertension? Do you have high cholesterol? Or how much do you weigh? So it's physical, but there is not much attention paid to mental health. But over the past few years, I would say that there is already that buzz, which I hope is a good one, which makes people more attentive to mental health, because truly there is no health without mental health, and health is not just physical health. So what is mental health? Mental health is the state of well-being in which the individual, for one, recognizes her capabilities, her strengths, all the knowledge, the intellect that one has. This has to be recognized and maximized. Part of mental health also is being able to cope with day-to-day stresses. All of us all of us are going through this. No one is spared from stresses. So whether you are a banker or a doctor or a lawyer or a homemaker, there will be stresses, no? And then we can actually also look at mental health in terms of our functioning. What is it that we get to do? Let's say with our work, with the roles that we play in life. Are we productive? Are we bearing fruit as far as our day-to-day activities are concerned? And then also the other one is not just something that has to do with ourselves, but are we able to contribute to the community? Are we able to contribute to the society at large? So this is something that goes beyond ourselves. And this is also part of one's mental health. And therefore, when we look at mental health, it is a rather encompassing term which includes emotional, psychological, social, and spiritual well-being, which we will elaborate on further in the succeeding slides. This is very, very important because this is now what is usually used in order to explain one's health. And it is the biopsychosocial spiritual model. earlier on, it was just biopsychosocial. So if you look at this, it looks like a four-leaf clover, and it has the leaves would actually have the different aspects that contribute or cause one's wellness, one's well-being, and one's health, or on the other hand, one's disease. So if we look at the biological side, this is where genetics come in. So notice that a lot of conditions, physical conditions that we have are also genetically predisposed. In fact, there are also mental conditions which are also genetically predisposed. Hypertension, diabetes, even stroke, or mental conditions like depression or anxiety can have a familial predisposition to it. And so apart from that, it's in the genes, it's in the neurotransmitters, it's your physiologic makeup. So the biological part is something that we can say we are born with, and therefore we cannot alter. And yet it is very much contributory to disease and wellness. On the other hand, we have the psyche and the psychological part, which includes your personality traits, your characteristics, your sense of self-worth, your self-esteem. Usually what coping mechanisms you use when you are under a lot of stress, or defense mechanisms, which are the not very conscious mechanisms that you use in order to protect yourself whenever there is stress. So these are part of the psychological aspect of one's well-being. And then, of course, us man being social beings, there is that social aspect where our connectedness with other people also contributes to our wellness. How we relate to other people, family, friends, relatives, co-workers, etc. And then lastly is the spiritual aspect. So like I said before, especially even for those who have not really tapped on their spirituality, it used to be just biopsychosocial. But we can look at it in terms of biopsychospiritual, in terms of ourselves and also the members, and of course, any person you know close to you, a significant other who really also looks into one's spirituality. What are we in this earthly life for? What is the meaning of our life at this time? What is our ultimate goal? And so if we look at this four-leaf clover, another way also of looking at the biopsychosocial spiritual, it like a four-legged stool. And in a four-legged stool, if one leg is broken, or if one leg is imbalanced or skewed, then you see the wellness and the well-being of the person gets tipped, whether it's the biological aspect, the spiritual aspect, the psychological, or the social aspect. Now, after we have seen what contributes to wellness and well-being, it's good to try to see what triggers or what pushes certain day-to-day ongoings to happen. And of course, like I said, stressors are triggering events that we usually react to or respond to. And it's very important for us to see what are our stressors. Of course, everyone has his or her own fair share of stressors, because stresses are, in fact, universal. No one in this world has not experienced stress. And I'm sure all of you, before you came this morning, I hope it had been a relaxing morning and you woke up fine on the right side of the bed. But in the background of that, you could still be experiencing some day-to-day stressors, and in varying degrees. So one, we know for a fact that this pandemic in itself is a big stressor for many of us, since we didn't see it coming. It was not expected. But on the other hand, we've already been experiencing it for the past 1 year and 2 months. So that's how long at least in Manila, it broke out in March, and then it's already May, almost end of May 2021, more than a year and 2 months, and we are still in this pandemic. And notice how that has proven to be a stressor in many, many different ways. Losing a loved one during this time, or even in the past, You know how stressful that can be. Having financial difficulties, uh, work stresses, no? So the day-to-day work stresses, whether you are a lawyer or a doctor or an employee in a company, an accountant, all of these stresses in terms of the things that you do on a day-to-day basis, it of course gives pressure. And if you're having difficulties in marriage, I think the survey of GIA also showed that there were some questions regarding what are your other concerns. And most of the concerns in that list would actually include the stressors that you are experiencing. And during this pandemic also, there had been experience of job loss, people losing their jobs or even quitting their jobs because of their conditions and the factors that have also changed as far as the work is concerned. And mental health problems in general are also stressors for any person who is experiencing them. And this is something that we have to also take into consideration. Stresses can also trigger mental health problems. When the mental health problem is there, then it can also pose a stress to that individual and even the people around or the family members taking care of this person. Chronic illnesses like cancer, those who are on chronic dialysis, these are stressful experiences that a person can have in life. Notice that, you know, when, let's say, an elderly parent gets sick and you need to somehow put your life a little bit on a different mode to be able to take care of your elderly relative or your parents, then this can also be stressful. One of the known stresses high in the list is moving homes. So for those who are actually transferring houses, no, the mere fact that you are packing your stuff, trying to sort things out, trying to see which one is left behind, which one needs to be disposed of, and which one gets brought. So these are also known stressors. And I'm sure you can add much, much more to this long list because, like I said, we have our own share of unique stressors and common stressors that we have with other people. Okay, and therefore, when there are stressors or triggering events, there are expected reactions, no? And this is where the difference lies because many people would react to stresses differently. And there are several categories when it comes to that: the emotional, the physical, the mental, the behavioral, and spiritual reactions. All right. So if you look at the common stressors that we have just discussed earlier, there can be reactions to those stressors. As a reaction to what your day-to-day life has been like, perhaps this past week, or what happened this morning or yesterday. And these are actually your emotional responses. And during this time, we do hear of a variety of emotional reactions. And let me just mention a few which are, I would say, more on the negative side. People have been afraid during this time because of the impact of the pandemic in their lives. No, there's this hovering fear of getting COVID or our loved ones, our family members getting sick of COVID. So this is a normal response to what is going on around us. Some can feel anxious and uncertain because of not knowing what's going to happen in the future, what's going to happen to their jobs, what's going to happen to their livelihood. So there are people who can feel anxious as a reaction to what is going on. There are those who can also feel very sad, usually because of the losses that we have experienced, the loss of our freedom to go out anytime we want and without a mask. There can be sadness as a result of the loss of routine, no? The things that we are used to doing, eating out, going to, let's say, out of town to the beach for a relaxing time. There can be sadness as a result of the limitation in that, no? So, but of course, the changes are happening. So these sad reaction can also vary over time. And sadness can also happen when we lose a loved one. We've heard of deaths among us, death among community members, deaths perhaps in your families or in your friends' families. And this can cause sadness as a reaction to the happenings. Guilt can happen as a result of perhaps wanting to help, not being able to, and you feel guilty, or you feel guilty that you have maybe brought the infection at home. So this is varied feelings, no, that happen as a response to what is happening. Confusion can happen because of the many much information around. Sometimes they are contradictory to each other. Sometimes people say this, people say that, and people say so many things you don't know what to believe in anymore, and it can be rather confusing. Irritation is a common feeling or emotional reaction. I think commonly we get irritated when there's something that doesn't go as planned, or when we encounter differences in the way we look at things. No, irritation is a normal reaction. Anger. I think no one has not experienced anger. In fact, in the scriptures, we just read about Jesus getting angry because of how the temple had been turned into like a marketplace, no? Or the fig not bearing fruit. So anger is an emotion that we can also experience even during this time. Why is this happening? What is the meaning of all this? And one can have anger as a reaction to that. And then if you have read the article lately that came out, no, this is another way of describing one's feeling about the what's going on in this pandemic that seems to be dragging on long, and as if there is no end to it. It's languishing, no? So it's the blah feeling, something that you cannot describe because it just makes you languish in boredom, stagnation, lack of productivity, and that's that languishing feeling. So notice that we're discussing emotions in light of the fact that there is a normal range of emotions, and we don't always have to feel okay. Sometimes there is that sense that we get that, you know, if you're not okay, just keep quiet about it. No, but it's okay to not feel okay at times. Of course, if it is too frequent, then we'll go to that later. But we don't have to feel okay all the time. And if you're not feeling okay, if you're feeling tired, exhausted, frustrated, like the ones that who have placed it there a while ago, that's all right, because that is a normal reaction. So what are the other reactions? So we placed several categories earlier. Aside from the emotional reaction, we have physical reactions. Let's say if you have difficulty sleeping at night because you have this particular problem, or you had this encounter with your boss, or you have so many demands at work that are coming all at the same time, and then you couldn't sleep as a result of that. That is a physical reaction. You could also have physical reactions of stress, like hyperacidity for some, or tension headaches, no? Or your blood pressure going up. And these are physical reactions. Again, they can be temporary, transient reactions, after which, if you relax afterwards, then it goes down. There can also be mental reactions, for example, becoming very forgetful or absent-minded, or having certain lapses in memory, not knowing where you placed something, or it's possible to be distracted, or to lose your attention span, your usual attention span, or find yourself, your mind drifting, or these are the cognitive reactions that can also happen when a person is stressed out. Now, there can also be behavioral reactions, the things that people do. See in that picture, that person is binge eating. So some people engage in stress eating, or in, let's say, binge watching or playing video games, no? So, or during the time of the pandemic, if you started going to the grocery and did some panic buying, that's a behavioral reaction. So if it happens in terms of your actions and the things that you do, they are called behavioral reactions. And then lastly, this one is also a behavioral reaction, but at the same time, it's a spiritual reaction if it has prompted us to, let's say, pray more, or pray the rosary, or pray the novena, or read scriptures more. And if you do that as a response to stress, that becomes a spiritual reaction. So you see here that there's a variety of reactions that we can actually have in the face of stress. Let's try to see how, in fact, you can spot the signs. So how do we recognize psychological distress? No. So one, there can be sadness, but like I said, differentiating this from normal sadness, the sadness is prolonged. And by prolonged, how prolonged is prolonged? So at least 2 weeks, then that would be clinical. But even shorter than that, then that can be the blues. And when we say the blues, we're referring to mild depression. No? So it can be prolonged, or it can happen too frequently. Let's say in a span of a month, you can be feeling sad 75% of the time. And that would be, and then it can be on and off, but it seems to be there, present, and it doesn't seem to be lifting. So that would be something that you need to spot. Mood swings, no? So persons with highs and lows. And by highs, we mean extremely high, like very euphoric, elevated mood, talkative, with pressured speech, no? So these are things that are also indicative, or a drastic change from that to feeling depressed. Being socially withdrawn, not talking, not having any interest in things that you used to be interested in. So mood swings, highs and lows. Irritability of the more extreme type, aggression sometimes, or snapping for no apparent reason. Social withdrawal. Of course, nowadays, because we are community quarantining, so to speak, we connect with each other online a lot. So it's not very easy to pick up, right? But then again, if you hold meetings and then a person doesn't usually attend, or has not been responding to your texts or your efforts to reach out to this person, then that is also a possible sign. For people who are working, when their work performance starts to slip, that is also a sign, especially if it was not at par with what they were doing before. No? So there seems to be a change that is happening. So a change from the previous level of functioning. Absenteeism is, of course, being not around. Presenteeism is a very important word, which means you might be physically present, but your mind is elsewhere, or you're not attentive, or you're distracted, or your mind is really off, let's say your work, or let's say if you're in a presentation, or if you're talking to someone, you just couldn't focus. So that is presenteeism. And that is also something to watch out for. Lack of motivation in activities, whether it's work or leisurely activities, not having the interest in it anymore, and then not taking care of oneself, no, or having changes in one's appetite. And then, of course, a red flag would be if a person starts thinking, I don't want to live anymore, or I think I'm going to do something to hurt myself, or for me to disappear from the face of this earth, no? And on the other hand, those are called suicidal ideations and suicidal behaviors. There is also self-harm, where the intent of the person is not to kill oneself, but just to inflict pain or injure oneself. And self-harm is definitely a red flag. It is not something to be dismissed or, oh, okay lang yan, it's just the person's feeling. That is already a red flag. The mere fact that the person is coping and adapting by hurting oneself, please do not take it lightly. Other signs of distress that we have to also take note of are those that do not fall under depression but are on the anxiety spectrum. So those who are excessively anxious and excessively worry, this is actually a very common condition that many people have, but this is often undiagnosed and undertreated also. This is the type of anxiety and worry that doesn't really go away. It seems to be there. It's on and off. It's various things that cause people to worry. And then sometimes it already affects the person's day-to-day living, functioning, or even self-care. No? Or there could be anxiety attacks, no? Sudden bursts of palpitations, no? Faint feeling or dizziness, numbness in the extremities or in the hands. No, so these are attacks that happen sporadically within a few minutes. No, so usually if it's 1 minute and then it resolves, then that would be mild, and perhaps you'd like to see what could be causing that. But there are others which are longer, so usually 10 minutes and over, 30 minutes, or something that lasts the entire day, that is free floating anxiety. So there can be sporadic ones and there can be those that last longer during the day, and that's also something to watch out for. Sleep disturbances, so there can be difficulty sleeping at night, or you're able to sleep, but then you wake up in the middle of the night and then you cannot fall back to sleep anymore. Or those who have early morning awakening. No? So that means it's not, it's not your usual time of waking up, but then you get up and then you're not able to fall back to sleep and continue and extend it to be able to get adequate sleep. Substance abuse. I know this is something maybe we don't talk about it so much, but it is actually on the rise during the pandemic. People tend to self-medicate themselves, drinking alcohol, or for others, they can actually smoke weed. No, but and the other one would be aggressive, inappropriate behaviors. Again, sometimes we tend to dismiss this, but these are actually red flags when a person is very aggressive towards a spouse, let's say, or a child. This is something that we don't just simply brush away. No? So there might be something there. You encounter this, it's something that can be talked about. No? So again, the signs and symptoms, what makes it not just like the sporadic ones would be the frequency, if it happens too often, if it happens cyclically or repeatedly, and then if the duration is prolonged. The other one is, of course, the intensity. If it is quite high, even if it happened just once, you'll have to look into it. No? So let's say self-harm, but it was very intense to the point that the person was just not thinking about it, but did something, acted on it. No? And then there is, of course, impairment or hindrance in functioning. So it interferes already with the day-to-day work of the individual. So these are very important to remember as far as spotting these signs. So let's try to see in terms of how we can also use this question, how can we help our members, how can we help our relatives, our family members, if they are experiencing some form of distress. So how do we approach these people? One, if you are now aware of what the signs of distress are and you see it in a particular person, accept the person who is in distress. There's no need to brush it aside or to be wanting to make the person feel better immediately. Just accept the person, that the person is in distress and the person is reacting to normal stresses around, and that's why there is a reason for it as well. Accept the person for how he or she is presenting himself. Be a good listener. We cannot overemphasize that listening is a skill that pastoral leaders have been trained with, even in the IPLT. There's a lot of emphasis in empathic listening. And this is listening to the person and pausing and not being too quick to respond or give advice. No, just listen. And when we listen, we also pay attention to the person's feelings and we validate the person's feelings. How is the person feeling while the person was talking to you? And that's a valid feeling, whether it's a frustration or upset, annoyed, sad. Just listen, and you will be able to understand what is happening in the other person's side. Now, again, when we help them see a positive angle to their life or their situation, let us not be too quick to do this. Sometimes we skip that the validating emotions part and we go to here. Why don't you look at it this way? No, and you try to cheer them up, etc. Sometimes, if you're too quick to do that, it might not be helpful. In fact, what I do often is to ask the person if they're ready to hear advice, and that's the time you can come in, no? Because if not, no matter what you say, also it might not sink in, or the person might not receive it well because the person is still experiencing the emotional distress. So this is something that has to do with the cues of the person that you are talking to or the member that you are talking to. But of course, when they are open to it, your inputs will help, because if you're able to let them see another perspective that can help them in their situation, then that also is helpful in addressing the problem. Now, that's why we went through this, is if you spot signs that you think would need clinical attention, please do not hesitate to encourage them to do so. And we are here to help out in facilitating access to services, because there are services available out there. Okay. And then lastly, we can speak about God's love. Oftentimes, when they are in that moment, they may not always feel God's love. But we know that God's love is something that is encompassing. Even if a person does not feel it, it is there. And it's good, sometimes they need to be reminded about that. Okay. But again, not to be too quick to talk about these things without validating the person's circumstance, without validating how the person is feeling. So these are the things that you might be wondering. So what can I say? No, or it's hard to put words in my mouth. I might say the wrong thing. No? So what are the things that you can say? You can tell them that you are not alone in this. I am here for you. I can see that this is a really hard time for you. You may not believe it now, but the way you're feeling will change. Remember when we had the emotions course, no? That feelings, one of the feelings is that feelings are neither right nor wrong, because they are neither right nor wrong. It is already how the person is experiencing it, and they are valid, but they are not permanent. They can change. So you can tell them that the way they're feeling may change. I may not be able to understand exactly how you feel, but I care about you and I like to help. I understand if they are already, let's say, going seeking help, and you have confirmed that they have a condition. I understand you have a condition, and this is what causes these thoughts and feelings. If sometimes you pick up that they are in the brink of giving up on life, telling them you are important to me, your life is important to me, would be good to, it's something that is uplifting. So being there for them, no? So you can stay in touch. You can text. Of course, you have your regular meetings. In fact, sometimes our women's group, we meet more than we see our relatives even, no? So we can go out, dine out, do a physical activity together, exercise, etc. But now activities are limited into virtual, but we can be creative about it, no? So you can have, so there are people who can do painting together. There is sip and go. There are plant workshops that can be done together. I remember when we had, that was a very interesting women's activities afternoon, no? When there was baking, we had brownies, we had bread, and it was a fun activity. So it's a virtual activity that can be done. And this is something that can help temporarily, because it helps distract them of their problems, which is, and the social connectedness and the connection helps them as far as their distress is concerned. Now, it's also very important to educate them about healthy habits. There, as we showed in the iceberg model earlier, The reason could very well be certain lifestyle behaviors, no, or activities that they do, which can be rather unhealthy, and it can contribute to the problem. So, we can't just address those without looking into the cause and the basic things. And basic things are getting adequate sleep, being able to exercise, and making sure to eat a balanced diet. And we'll also talk more about that later. Encourage pursuing some interests, no, if they have in the arts, in music. This is something that they can engage in at this time, and then acknowledge their achievements. No, not just big achievements, but even small achievements. No, if let's say a person is depressed and they're able to do their errands, if they're able to go, let's say, to the bank to withdraw money, or to do an important errand, you can praise them and affirm them for it, and it is an uplifting thing to do for persons like this, no. So even the small things that they do, or if they were able to attend even a gathering or a meeting, you acknowledge them for it, thank them for it. When to refer, this is just a guide. So and what is urgent and what is non-urgent. So oftentimes, for example, even a panic attack is not considered urgent. It is not a life-threatening, but it is still something that deserves clinical attention. So it would be good to access services at a timely way, so that help can be given also in a timely manner. So what is urgent? Actually, there are only two: suicide and aggression or agitation, violence. No, so if there is danger to self or other people, then that is considered urgent. Sometimes you'll have to bring them to the emergency room already. That's how urgent it is. But on the other hand, if there can be suicidal ideations, you watch over them at home, then you can set an appointment, even if it is on outpatient basis, and it is still, and then services can still be rendered. So what is non-urgent? So in addition to the earlier signs that we said, if you could pick up abnormal bereavement. When we say abnormal bereavement, a person who is going through grief but is already manifesting with depression, no longer taking care of oneself. So remember, grief is normal, but depression is not. So let us also not dismiss it as, oh, the person is just grieving, but the person is already wanting to commit suicide, for example, or is not taking care of herself, is not eating properly, and already wants to join, let's say, his or her partner, no, and in a lingering way, not in an acute, oh, parang one time the person said it, no, but something that lingers. I said prolonged, frequent. And then behavioral and emotional problems, family dysfunction. Like I said, it's not something to be disregarded, or, oh no, it's just happening like that. No. Substance misuse or behavioral addiction. So remember, addiction is not just with substances. There can be internet addiction. There can be behavioral addictions like sex addiction also, or pathological gambling. No, significant sleep disturbances, as I've said, and then of course those who have diminished social support. This is important. Let's say, especially nowadays, no, when people are living alone, they're isolated, and then there's less help available, less social connections available. All right. Now, I said this is about us. And so it's very important that we look into ourselves and how we are taking care of ourselves. No? So it is about practicing self-care. And it is, of course, very important because we are not able to take care of other people if we do not take care of ourselves. We cannot overemphasize this concept. No? So how do we build resilience and maintain wellness in ourselves? One, we accept that change is part of life. No, many people actually struggle with change. So if we look at the pandemic, there was a drastic change, and so those who can accept it rather than resist it tend to cope better. Now, so if you're able to accept that this is the change, let us try to investigate what we need to do in order to adapt to that change. Then chances are you'll be able to coast along with it. But if you resist it and if you fight it, then of course problems can arise and it can become more stressful for the individual. So that's just an example. But then there are other changes going on. So change as far as, let's say, moving homes or changing jobs, for example. No, so this happens a lot, and of course, because we can be creatures of habit, then when changes happen, then we are not able to adapt as quickly or as much as we want to. So flexibility is very important, and it is one characteristic that allows us to accept and to adapt to change. Now, of course, with changes, there can be goals that are left behind and new goals that are reset. But we have to develop realistic ones. Otherwise, we are setting ourselves up for frustration if we don't set realistic goals. So if, let's say, you're single and your goal is to get married, for example, and that is your state of life and that is your vocation, but then you don't take steps in order to reach that particular goal, then most likely you're not going to meet that goal. So you want to, let's say, socialize, get to know other people so that your state of life can be attained. No, because if this is not aligned with what you are doing, then there is something that you have to question in yourselves. No, why is it that what I am doing is not aligned to my goal, and how will I get to that goal if I'm doing things in the opposite direction? So look for growth in loss. No, when there is loss, and loss is part of life, we experience it unexpectedly, something that we may not want. But it does happen, and when it does happen, we accept that happening, and then we try to look for growth in it. What can I learn from this? When I lose something, what is there for me to gain? And if you're able to find out, then you develop to bounce back even after a loss. Nurture a positive view of yourself. No, so this is very important for knowing what your self-worth is, what your self-esteem is, because usually mental health concerns also happen when a person has low self-esteem or poor self-esteem. I am reminded, let's say, of a patient. No, whenever she, the first thought that pops out in her mind really is that she's not likable. She's a very pleasant person. I like her even as a patient, very pleasant, speaks very sweetly, soft spoken. No, but then the way she looks at herself is really very negative. And of course, that is something that will translate to your relations with other people, how you view your work, how you evaluate your own work. So having a positive view of oneself is very important. Sometimes when you're asked, okay, what are your strengths? No, the person gets flustered and doesn't know what to say. So I think it's important for us as individuals to know what our strengths are, what we are good at. It's not about bragging or being arrogant, acknowledging it to yourself. What are, let's say, your God-given gifts? No, and to appreciate these and to use them to the fullest and to make them bear fruit is also one way of giving back. Now, we mentioned boosting mental health and then build connection, family and friends. Of course, social connectedness is very important for one's well-being, and we know this. Okay. All right. Now, so I wanted to show this because it is something that is also scripture-based. No? This was from a Christian well-being course in Healers, where the acronym is attitude is the answer. Now, attitude and then answer. Answer stands for air, nutrition, sunshine, water, exercise, and rest. So for those who are into naturopathy, or you will like this because it is all natural. No? So, and this is a reminder to us that being healthy is not something that is really, really very difficult, but sometimes we have to pay attention to what is basic and what is important. Attitude. What is the attitude? And it is lifted from Genesis 1. So if you look at this photo, much of it, air, water, no? Sunshine, these are all God given. And in the first story of creation, we saw how God planned what he created, he implemented it, and then in the end, he said, what I made was good. He evaluated it. So planning, implementing, and evaluating. So this is the kind of attitude that we can have as far as our health goes. No, if we have calculated that we are overweight, or if we are already obese class one, let us face it. It is, of course, it is. In fact, you know that it is one of the comorbidities, even for COVID infection. What is our body mass index? Is it within the regular range? Is it within the normal range? So it is based on your weight and your height. So it can be easily calculated. You can Google it, and then you can find out where you are in the body mass index. Between 19 to 23, then that would be normal. Above that, you can be slightly overweight, and then beyond that, some more, 25 and above, then you are already obese. So if you are falling there, what do you do? So if we want to take care of our bodies, then we try weight management. So weight management can be done. It can be through counseling. So that's planning, implementing, and evaluating. And then the others are really very practical. No? So the air, breathe, it's very important. Nutrition, what is there are, what kind of diet do you think is important? What kind of diet do you think is healthy and recommended? If you're familiar with Mediterranean diet, okay, Mediterranean diet has been found to be more or less the most balanced of all kinds of diets. So again, we're not talking about keto or IF, because those are rather on the extreme side. And yes, there are bases to those as well, no? But even nutritionists would advocate a balanced diet, something that you can actually sustain. And by that, all the components and the ingredients are there. And there are studies that show that the Mediterranean diet is quite good. It's high in vegetables, yes. But also, if you look at during Jesus' time and the people in the Middle East, no? So that is what they eat. And it is considered to be what is healthy. Now, sunshine, water, and then water, as we said, water intake is not just, the usual 8 glasses of water, but rather water can be calculated from one's body weight in kilograms multiplied by 30 ml. So for example, if I am 50 kilograms, I multiply it by 30, that is 1,500 ml or 1.5 liters. So I'm supposed to drink 1.5 liters. If you have a 250 ml glass, then that would be 6 glasses of water. So that means it's really based on how much a person is weighing. And of course, you factor in, on top of that, temperature. Nowadays, it's very hot, so more water intake on top of the minimum that we have calculated. The other one is if you engage in physical activity. So if you do exercise, then that means you can add and drink more water on top of the calculated daily water intake. Then, of course, rest. On the last day, the Lord rested, no? And after he did the creation. Okay, so rest is very important because sleeping is also part of rest, and it is something that we have to pay attention to if we want to remain well. So avoiding burnout, so like it's part of the self-care, take care of other people. Remember, in the airplane, the stewardess would always show us, put the oxygen mask in yourself first before you give it to your child and before you give it to your companion. So it's very important that you take care of yourselves while you take care of your members. Make time for life away from them. It's not be all about them. Yes, we are supposed to be other-centered, but on top of that, by being other-centered yourself about depression, anxiety, and other mental health issues, similar to what we are doing like right now in this learning session. And then, of course, pray, read scriptures, and even more. So, with this, I'd like to just end with this verse from Corinthians chapter 1. Blessed be the God and Father of our Lord Jesus Christ, the Father of mercies and God of all comfort, who comforts us in all our affliction, that we may be able to comfort those who are in any affliction through the comfort which we ourselves are comforted by God. And so with that, I'd like to thank you for listening.